The survival hall on Velar Prime was packed with cadets from every corner of the galaxy. They were with their rigid green scales and four muscular arms. They were with their clicking mandibles and compound eyes that saw in spectrums most species could not imagine. They were with their pale skin and long fingers built for climbing. And in the back row, mostly ignored, sat the two humans. Danny Cole leaned back in his seat and watched the other cadets talk among themselves. He was 24 years old with short brown hair and calm gray eyes that rarely showed what he was thinking. Before joining the Galactic Survival Academy, he had spent 6 years teaching wilderness survival in the mountains of Montana. He knew how to find water in a desert. He knew which insects were safe to eat. He knew how to make fire with nothing but sticks and patience. But here among aliens who could see heat signatures and smell water from miles away, none of that seemed to matter. Lisa Marsh sat next to him. She was 26 with red hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had been a marine biologist before the academy recruited her for her expertise in xenobiology. She understood alien life forms better than most humans alive. But like Danny, she had learned quickly that understanding did not equal respect in this place. The door at the front of the hall slid open and Instructor walked in. It was enormous, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales the color of dark emeralds. His 4 arms were folded behind his back as he surveyed the room with yellow eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Today begins your final examination," announced. His voice was deep and carried easily through the silent hall. "You will be transported to 7, a moon in the outer territories. You will remain there for 72 hours with no supplied rations. Your goal is simple: survive." Murmurs spread through the cadets. Danny noticed that most of them did not seem worried. A could go 2 weeks without food. A could digest almost any mineral compound. Humans, on the other hand, needed regular meals to function at their best. Continued speaking. 7 has been classified as Category 0 for edible resources. This means that according to every survey conducted by experts over the past 300 years, nothing on that moon can sustain biological life forms through consumption. Danny raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Your challenge is not to find food," said. "Your challenge is to endure hunger, to manage your energy, to survive without the comforts you have grown dependent upon." His yellow eyes swept across the room and stopped on Danny and Lisa. "Some of you will find this more difficult than others." A few cadets laughed. Danny kept his expression neutral. "Humans," said, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Your species has no natural claws for hunting, no venom for subduing prey, no enhanced senses for tracking. Your bodies are fragile and your metabolisms are demanding. In survival scenarios, humans consistently rank among the lowest performers." Lisa's jaw tightened, but she did not respond. Danny simply watched the Instructor with quiet attention. "I expect the humans to struggle the most," concluded. "Try not to slow down your teammates." The transport to 7 took 4 hours. Danny spent the time reviewing what he knew about Category 0 planets. The classification meant that standard dietary requirements could not be met by any native organism. But Danny had noticed something interesting during his studies. The surveys only tested for things that could eat. They never considered what other species might find edible. The shuttle landed on a gray, rocky surface beneath a pale yellow sky. The air was thin but breathable. The temperature was cold but survivable. Danny stepped out and immediately began observing his surroundings while the other cadets focused on setting up shelter. His team consisted of 5 members. Lisa was there, which Danny was grateful for. The other 3 were a with iridescent wings folded against her back, a young who seemed determined to prove himself, and a with dark purple skin and a metabolism that burned energy faster than any other species present. Immediately took charge. "We set up shelter here. We conserve energy. We do not waste time on foolish activities." He looked directly at Danny when he said the last part. Danny nodded agreeably and then walked away from the group. "Where is the human going?" demanded. "Let him go," said. Her compound eyes tracked Danny's movement with curiosity. "If he wants to waste his energy, that is his problem." Danny walked slowly around the perimeter of their landing zone. He picked up rocks and examined them. He crouched down and touched the gray moss that grew in patches between the stones. He found a small plant with thick leaves and broke one open to smell the liquid inside. He touched a tiny amount to the skin on his wrist and waited. Lisa joined him after 20 minutes. "You do not believe the instructor." It was not a question. Danny smiled slightly. "Every planet has something. Every ecosystem has energy moving through it somehow. If there is moss, something is eating it or it is eating something. If there are rocks with mineral deposits, something is breaking them down. Life finds a way, Lisa. And humans have always been good at finding life." Lisa looked back at their camp where was loudly organizing the shelter construction. "They think we are weak." "They think we are limited," Danny corrected. "There is a difference. Our ancestors survived ice ages and deserts and jungles with nothing but stone tools and stubbornness. We did not have claws, so we made spears. We did not have venom, so we learned which plants were poison. We did not have enhanced senses, so we learned to read tracks and weather patterns and the behavior of animals." He crouched down again and used a small knife to dig into the soil. Beneath the surface, he found something that looked like a white root. He cut off a small piece and examined it carefully. "What is that?" Lisa asked. "I do not know yet," Danny admitted, "but I intend to find out." That night, while the other cadets huddled in their shelter and tried to ignore their growing hunger, Danny sat outside with a small collection of samples spread before him. Rocks with unusual mineral content, moss from 3 different locations, the white root, a fungus he had found growing beneath a boulder, small insect-like creatures that had crawled out when he moved certain stones. Emerged from the shelter and stood watching him. Her compound eyes reflected the distant stars. "Instructor said nothing here is edible," she said. Danny looked up at her. "Instructor said nothing here is edible for. He never asked what might be edible for humans." He held up the fungus. "This has no nutritional value for your species, but for humans it contains complex carbohydrates that our bodies can process." "You cannot know that," said. Danny smiled. "Not yet, but by morning I will." Tilted her head in the way did when they encountered something unexpected. "You truly believe you can find food on a barren moon that scientists declared empty?" Danny thought about the mountains of Montana. He thought about the deserts of Arizona and the frozen tundra of Alaska. He thought about every impossible landscape where humans had not only survived but thrived. "I believe," he said quietly, "that humans have been hearing the word impossible for our entire history, and I believe we have never been very good at listening." Dawn came slowly on 7. The pale yellow sky turned slightly orange as the distant sun crept above the rocky horizon. Danny had slept for only 3 hours, but he felt sharp and focused. He had work to do. Lisa found him already awake and sorting through his samples from the night before. She crouched beside him and handed him a small container of water from their limited supplies. "You need to stay hydrated if you are going to keep this up," she said. Danny accepted the water gratefully. "I found something interesting while you were sleeping." He held up the white root he had dug up the previous day. "I did the skin test last night. No reaction. Then I did the lip test. Still nothing. This morning I chewed a small piece and held it in my mouth for 15 minutes. And no burning, no numbness, no unusual taste beyond a slight bitterness." Danny cut a larger piece from the root. "I am going to swallow a small amount and wait 2 hours. If nothing happens, I think we have our first food source." Lisa took the root and examined it with her portable analyzer. Her eyes widened at the readings. "Danny, this has significant caloric content. Carbohydrates, some protein, trace minerals. This is not just edible. This is nutritious." Danny nodded. The surveys dismissed it because their digestive systems cannot process this type of fiber, but human stomachs evolved to handle exactly this kind of rough plant material. Danny had confirmed the root was safe. He dug up more of them and showed Lisa how deep they grew beneath the surface. The scanners had registered them as inert organic matter and moved on. They had not considered that inert for might mean dinner for humans. Watched them work from a distance. Her curiosity was growing stronger than her skepticism. "You have been observing the human all morning," said to her with disapproval. "He is wasting time digging in the dirt like an animal." "He found food," replied simply. Made a dismissive sound. "Impossible. The surveys clearly state that nothing here is edible." Perhaps the surveys were incomplete. Danny moved on to the fungus next. This one required more careful processing. He crushed the fungus into a paste and soaked it in water for several hours. Some species of fungus on Earth contained toxins that could be leached out through this method. Danny suspected the same principle might apply here. Lisa analyzed the soaking water periodically. The toxic compounds are dissolving into the water. The fungus itself is becoming safer with each hour. "How did you know to do this?" Had approached without Danny noticing. "Could move very quietly when they chose." Danny looked up at her. "On Earth, there is a plant called cassava. It is poisonous when raw, but humans learned thousands of years ago that if you soak it and dry it and process it correctly, it becomes safe to eat. It fed millions of people who would have otherwise starved." "Your species learned to make poison into food." "My species learned to make almost anything into food," Danny said. "We had to. We were not the fastest animals on our planet. We were not the strongest. We did not have natural weapons or armor. What we had was the ability to adapt and the stubbornness to keep trying until we figured things out." By afternoon, Danny had identified 12 potential food sources. 8 of them had passed his initial testing. He taught Lisa his methodology, and she began conducting her own tests on samples from different areas. The fungus paste was ready by evening. Danny mixed it with crushed root and mineral-rich water he had found seeping through a crack in a nearby rock formation. The result looked unappetizing but smelled surprisingly neutral. "Meal number 1, Danny announced. He took a bite and chewed slowly. "Tastes like wet cardboard, but it will keep us alive." Lisa tried it next and made a face. "You were not wrong about the cardboard." "May I try?" They both turned to find standing behind them. The compound eyes reflected the fading light. Danny hesitated. "I do not know if this is safe for your species. Human digestive systems are different from one's." "I understand the risk." Reached out with one delicate limb. "I wish to understand your methods." Danny gave her a small portion, consumed it carefully, and then stood very still for several minutes. "The texture is unusual," she said finally, "but I detect no negative reactions. This may be compatible with my biology as well." From across the camp, watched with growing irritation. He had spent the day conserving energy as instructed, but his stomach was growling and his mood was darkening. The humans were supposed to be struggling. Instead, they were eating. "This proves nothing," muttered. "A few bites of processed dirt will not sustain them for 3 days." But Danny was not finished. He had noticed something during his exploration that morning. There were small creatures living beneath certain rocks. They looked like insects but moved more slowly. The surveys had classified them as parasites and recommended avoiding them. Danny had different ideas. He constructed simple traps using pieces of the bioluminescent moss he had found growing in a small cave. The moss glowed faintly in the darkness and attracted the small creatures. By nightfall, Danny had caught several dozen of them. "Protein," he explained to Lisa as he carefully prepared the creatures over a small chemical heat source. "Humans have been eating insects for our entire history. High in protein, low in fat, easy to prepare." Lisa looked uncertain. "I know that intellectually, but actually eating them is different. Danny laughed softly. Close your eyes and think of shrimp. Shrimp are basically ocean insects. Humans eat billions of them every year. The prepared insects were crunchy and tasted faintly of nuts. Lisa admitted they were better than she expected. Tried one and found it acceptable. The who had kept his distance from the humans until now finally approached the fire. His purple skin looked pale and his movements were sluggish. I am having difficulty, he admitted quietly. My metabolism is too fast. I cannot endure 3 days without food. Danny looked at him for a long moment. This was the same who had laughed when Instructor mocked the humans, the same who had refused to acknowledge Danny and Lisa as equals. Lisa glanced at Danny. She knew what he was thinking. Danny reached for one of the containers of prepared food. Sit down, he said to. The root paste should be compatible with biology. You will need to eat slowly. Your stomach will not be used to this. Stared at the offered food. Why would you help me? I have not been kind to you. Danny shrugged. Because you need help, and because that is what humans do. We survived on Earth not because we were the strongest, but because we learned to take care of each other. Accepted the food with trembling hands. He ate slowly as Danny instructed. Color began returning to his purple skin within the hour. Watched the exchange with an expression that might have been wonder. 17 food sources identified in less than 2 days, she said quietly, on a moon that scientists declared completely barren. Danny smiled and looked out at the rocky landscape that surrounded them. I am just getting started. The second day on 7 began with Danny venturing further from camp than he had before. Lisa walked beside him while followed at a respectful distance. Had wanted to come, but Danny insisted he rest and recover his strength. The landscape changed as they moved away from the landing zone. The flat, rocky ground gave way to small hills covered in a different type of moss. The caves Danny had glimpsed on the first day grew larger and more numerous. There was more life here than the surveys had suggested. You just had to know how to look for it. Tell me about Earth, said as they walked. Her compound eyes constantly scanned the terrain around them. Tell me how humans learned to survive. Danny considered the question. Earth is a harsh planet in many ways. We have deserts where nothing seems to live. We have frozen lands where the cold can kill in minutes. We have jungles so thick you cannot see the sky. He paused to examine a rock with unusual coloring. But humans spread across all of it. We found ways to live in every environment our planet offered. How? By watching, by experimenting, by failing and trying again. Danny crouched down and pointed at the moss beneath his feet. Look at this. It is a different color than the moss near camp. Different color usually means different chemistry. Different chemistry might mean different nutrients. He took a sample and handed it to Lisa for analysis. You test everything, observed. I have to. On Earth, the difference between food and poison is sometimes very small. Mushrooms that look almost identical can be the difference between a meal and death. Humans learn to be careful. We learn to develop methods for testing the unknown. They reached the entrance to a large cave system. Danny had brought a light source and moved slowly into the darkness. The walls were covered in bioluminescent organisms that created a soft blue glow. It was beautiful in a way that made Lisa catch her breath. I did not expect this, she admitted. Danny moved deeper into the cave. The bioluminescent life was more abundant here, away from the harsh surface conditions. He found patches of what looked like thick gel clinging to the walls. He found more of the insect-like creatures, larger specimens than the ones near camp, and he found something else entirely. Lisa, come look at this. She joined him at the back of the cave where water was seeping through the rock and forming a small pool. In the pool, small organisms were swimming. They were not quite fish and not quite anything else Lisa could identify, but they were clearly alive and clearly thriving. Protein source, Danny said simply, if I can figure out how to catch them. It took an hour of trial and error. Danny tried using his hands, but the creatures were too fast. He tried using a container, but they avoided it easily. Finally, he constructed a simple net from fibers he stripped from the thick-leafed plants growing near the cave entrance. The net worked well enough to catch several of the swimming creatures. 23 food sources, Lisa counted as they made their way back toward camp. 23 sources on a Category 0 moon. 25, Danny corrected. He held up 2 new samples. The gel from the cave wall contains simple sugars, and these larger insects have twice the protein content of the smaller ones. When they returned to camp, they found that word had spread. Cadets from other teams had begun arriving to see the humans who were eating while everyone else starved, stood apart from the group with his arms crossed and his expression sour. A cadet named approached Danny with obvious hesitation. "Is it true you found food here?" Danny showed her the containers of processed materials. He explained his testing methods and his preparation techniques, listened with growing amazement. "The survey said nothing was here," she said. "The survey said nothing was here for," Danny replied patiently. "They never asked what might be here for everyone else." More cadets gathered. Danny found himself teaching an impromptu class on human survival methodology. He explained the universal edibility test. He demonstrated how to process potentially toxic materials. He showed them how to observe an environment for signs of hidden resources. "Humans look at things differently," said to the assembled group. "They do not accept limitations. They question everything." Stood up from where he had been resting. The looked much stronger than he had the night before. "The human saved my life," he announced to the cadets who had mocked humans alongside him. "I would have collapsed from metabolic failure. He fed me when he had no reason to help." "He had every reason not to help," added from another team. "We have not treated humans well at this academy." Danny waved off the comments. "It does not matter. What matters is that we all survive these 72 hours, and we can do that better together than apart." The afternoon became a collaborative effort. Danny directed teams to search different areas based on his observations of the terrain. Lisa analyzed everything they brought back, coordinated communication between the scattered groups, even eventually stopped sulking and began contributing, though he refused to acknowledge Danny directly. By evening, the count had risen to 31 distinct food sources. Danny had categorized them into 3 groups. The first group was safe for immediate consumption with minimal processing. The second group required extensive preparation to remove toxins or improve digestibility. The third group was emergency only, safe to eat but unpleasant or limited. "This is remarkable," said as she studied Danny's documentation. "You have created a complete survival guide for a moon that was supposed to be barren." Danny shook his head. "Not complete. There is still more to find. There is always more to find." That night, a monitoring drone flew overhead and captured images of the camp. What had been a scattered collection of hungry cadets was now a functioning community. Multiple fires burned for warmth and food preparation. Groups of mixed species worked together on foraging and processing. And at the center of it, all were 2 humans who had been told they were the weakest members of the class. Back on Velar Prime, Instructor watched the footage in silence. His yellow eyes narrowed as he saw Danny demonstrating a technique to a group of attentive cadets. He saw Lisa explaining nutritional analysis to aliens who had never considered that food could be scientifically evaluated before consumption. He saw cooperation where he had expected competition. 31 food sources, his assistant reported. The humans have identified 31 distinct edible items on 7. Said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Continue monitoring. I want to see everything they do." On the surface of the barren moon, Danny sat by the fire and planned his final day of exploration. He had proven his point, but he was not satisfied yet. "You are thinking about something," Lisa said. Danny nodded slowly. The seeds. What seeds? In the soil near the eastern caves, I found what looked like dormant seeds. They are not growing because the conditions are not right, but with the right conditions, they might germinate. Lisa stared at him. You want to grow food on a barren moon? Danny smiled. I want to prove that there is no such thing as a barren moon, not if you know how to look, not if you refuse to give up. The final day on 7 began before sunrise. Danny was already moving across the rocky terrain while most of the other cadets still slept. Lisa followed close behind, carrying equipment they had improvised from salvaged materials, and had insisted on joining them despite their exhaustion. Where exactly are these seeds? Lisa asked as they climbed over a ridge of broken stone. Danny pointed toward a depression in the landscape where several caves opened into a natural basin. The soil composition is different there. More organic material mixed with the minerals. Something was growing in that area at some point. The seeds are what remain. They reached the basin as the first light touched the horizon. Danny knelt and began carefully sifting through the gray soil. Within minutes, he found what he was looking for. Small dark objects no larger than grains of rice were scattered through the dirt. Seeds, he confirmed, dormant but intact. Lisa scanned them with her analyzer. No cellular activity. They appear to be completely inactive. On Earth, some seeds can remain dormant for hundreds of years, Danny explained. They wait for the right conditions, temperature, moisture, light. When everything aligns, they wake up. Crouched beside him, you believe you can create these conditions? I believe I can try. Danny had thought about this problem throughout the night. The seeds needed warmth. He could provide that with a small heat source. They needed moisture. The seeping water from the caves would work. They needed light. The bioluminescent organisms produced light in the right spectrum for photosynthesis. He constructed a simple growing chamber from flat rocks and cave moss. He positioned it near a water seep and arranged bioluminescent material around the edges to provide constant low-level light. Then he planted a handful of seeds in moistened soil and sealed the chamber to retain heat and humidity. Now we wait, he said. How long? Asked. If this works, we should see something within hours. If it does not work, then I will try something else. While they waited, Danny continued his exploration of the surrounding area. He found more of the swimming creatures in underground pools. He discovered a type of lichen that produced a sweet, sticky substance when crushed. He identified a rock formation that contained crystallized minerals which could be dissolved in water to create a nutritious drink. The count reached 40, then 42, then 44. Word spread through the cadet camps. Groups began arriving to see the human who was finding food everywhere he looked. Danny welcomed them all and shared everything he learned. He demonstrated techniques. He answered questions. He refused to keep secrets. Why do you teach them? Finally asked. They had been watching Danny with something that was no longer quite hostility. It was closer to confusion. Danny paused his work and looked at directly. Because survival is not a competition. Because what I know only has value if I share it. Because humans learned long ago that cooperation keeps more people alive than competition. That is not how think. I know, but it is how humans think, and it is why we are still here. Danny returned to his work. Every species has strengths, are strong and resilient, can sense things we cannot, can climb anything. Humans are not special because we are better than anyone else. We are special because we learn to work with everyone else. Said nothing, but he did not walk away. By midday, Danny checked his growing chamber and found something extraordinary. Small green shoots were pushing up through the soil. The seeds were germinating. Life was growing on a moon that had been declared completely barren. Lisa stared at the tiny plants with tears in her eyes. Danny, do you understand what this means? It means meal number 45, Danny said with a slight smile. fresh vegetables. But Lisa shook her head. It means more than that. It means the surveys were wrong. It means there is potential for life here that no one recognized. It means humans see things that other species miss. Cadets gathered around the growing chamber. Some had never seen plants grow before. Others had never believed that growth was possible in such a hostile environment. They watched the tiny shoots reach toward the bioluminescent light, and something changed in the way they looked at the two humans who had made it happen. Danny used the remaining hours to push further than before. He explored caves no one had entered. He tested materials others had ignored. He found 2 more food sources that brought his total to 47 distinct edible items on a Category 0 moon. 47 meals, Lisa said as she documented the final count. 47 ways to survive on a world that was supposed to offer nothing. The extraction shuttles would arrive soon. Danny stood at the edge of the basin and looked out at the landscape that had been his home for 3 days. It was still gray and rocky and harsh, but now he saw it differently. He saw the seeping water and the hidden caves and the dormant seeds waiting for their chance to grow. He saw life where others had seen only emptiness. Joined him. I have learned more from you in 3 days than in 6 months at the academy. You learned that you were looking at things the wrong way, Danny said. That is the most important lesson anyone can learn. Will you return to being just another cadet after this? Danny considered the question. I do not know. I suppose that depends on Instructor. He is watching, said. The drones have been monitoring everything. He has seen what you accomplished. Danny nodded slowly. Good, then maybe he learned something too. The shuttles appeared on the horizon as the day's light began to fade. Cadets gathered their equipment and prepared to leave, but before they boarded, something unexpected happened. Approached Danny and stood before him with his 4 arms at his sides. This expression was difficult to read, but his body language had changed completely. I was wrong about humans, said. The words seemed to cost him effort. I was taught that your species was inferior. I believed it without question. I was wrong. Danny extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. You were taught wrong information. That is not your fault. What matters is what you do now that you know better. Looked at the offered hand, and then slowly extended one of his own arms. They clasped briefly, and something passed between them that needed no words. The shuttle doors opened and cadets began boarding. Danny took one last look at 7, a barren moon where nothing was supposed to grow, a Category 0 world where nothing was supposed to live. He smiled. Tomorrow he would face Instructor. Tomorrow there would be questions and challenges and probably conflict. But tonight Danny knew something that mattered more than any confrontation. He had proven that impossible was just another word for not yet. The assembly hall on Velar Prime was even more crowded than it had been 3 days earlier. Word had spread throughout the academy about what happened on 7. Instructors from other departments had come to observe. Senior officers sat in the back rows with expressions of careful neutrality. Every cadet who had participated in the survival exercise was present and waiting. Danny stood near the back with Lisa beside him. His muscles ached from 3 days of constant activity and limited sleep, but his mind was sharp and his resolve was steady. Instructor entered the hall and walked to the front podium. His scales seemed darker than usual, and his movements were stiff. He stood in silence for a long moment, surveying the assembled cadets with his yellow eyes. The survival exercise has concluded, announced. His deep voice carried no emotion. All cadets survived the 72-hour period. This is considered a successful outcome. He paused and looked down at a data screen built into the podium. However, the circumstances of this success were unexpected. The exercise was designed to test endurance and energy conservation on a resource-free world. It was not designed to test food acquisition, because food acquisition was supposed to be impossible. Murmurs rippled through the audience, raised one of his four hands, and silence returned. The human cadets have submitted a report claiming to have identified 47 distinct food sources on 7. His tone suggested he found this difficult to believe. This report will require verification before any conclusions can be drawn. Danny stepped forward without waiting to be called. Instructor, I request permission to present my findings to the assembly. His eyes fixed on him with obvious displeasure. Several senior officers leaned forward with interest. The instructor was trapped between his pride and the presence of his superiors. Very well, said finally, present your findings. Danny walked to the front of the hall. He activated the display system and brought up the documentation he and Lisa had compiled. Images of each food source appeared alongside nutritional data, preparation methods, and safety testing results. 7 was classified as Category 0 based on surveys conducted using dietary standards, Danny began. These surveys correctly determined that no native organism on the moon could sustain life through direct consumption. However, the surveys did not consider alternative approaches to food acquisition. He advanced through the presentation. The root vegetables, the processed fungus, the insect protein, the cave creatures, the mineral supplements, the germinated seeds, each discovery was documented with scientific precision. Humans evolved as generalist omnivores, Danny continued. We can digest materials that other species cannot. We developed processing techniques that transform inedible substances into edible food. We learned to test unknown materials through careful experimentation. Lisa stood and added her voice. The nutritional analysis confirms that these 47 sources contain sufficient calories, proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals to sustain human life indefinitely. Several sources are also compatible with and biology. Scales shifted in what might have been discomfort. You are suggesting that survey methods are flawed. Danny shook his head. I am suggesting that survey methods are excellent for purposes, but the galaxy contains many species with many different needs. A comprehensive survey would consider all of them. Humans have no special abilities, countered. You lack natural weapons. You lack enhanced senses. You lack resistance to environmental extremes. What gives your species the right to question surveys conducted by scientists? It was the question Danny had been waiting for. You are correct that humans lack many things, Danny said calmly. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We cannot see heat or smell water from miles away, but we have something else. He paused and looked around the assembly hall. We have 10,000 generations of ancestors who refused to accept that anything was impossible. He advanced to a new image. It showed humans living in a frozen wasteland, then humans living in a burning desert, then humans living on floating cities above a poisonous ocean. Humans spread across Earth and survived in every environment our planet offered. We did not do this because we were physically superior. We did it because we adapted, we learned, we experimented, we failed and tried again until we succeeded. Stood up from her seat. The human methodology works. I observed it directly. He found food where I saw nothing. He created resources where none existed. Rose as well. He saved my life when he had every reason to let me fail. Humans do not simply survive. They ensure that others survive alongside them. More cadets stood. Was among them, his expression complex but no longer hostile. Looked at his students with something that might have been uncertainty. For 300 years, teachings had placed humans at the bottom of the survival hierarchy. Now, a single human had challenged everything the Academy believed. One of the senior officers spoke for the first time. Instructor, what is your assessment of these findings? The hall went silent. Everyone watched the instructor process what he had seen and heard. His yellow eyes moved from Danny to the display to his superiors and back again. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. The findings appear to be legitimate. The human methodology appears to be effective. He paused and something shifted in his posture. The Academy curriculum will be updated to include human survival techniques as a standard component of training. Danny felt Lisa grip his arm. Around the hall, cadets were exchanging looks of surprise and something like hope. Was not finished. The human cadet has demonstrated exceptional ability. I am recommending that he be offered a position as assistant instructor in the survival program. His eyes met Danny's. If he will accept it. Danny stood. I will accept on one condition. Survival training must become collaborative. Every species has unique strengths. We should be learning from each other, not competing against each other. Considered this for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He bowed his head slightly in the gesture of acknowledgement. Agreed, he said. 6 months later, Danny stood before a new class of cadets on a new world. Lisa was beside him, now his official co-instructor, had become a teaching assistant, specializing in multi-species communication, had returned to share survival techniques with future generations. Danny looked at the assembled cadets, and a dozen other species, and among them more humans than any previous class had contained. He smiled and began his lecture with words that had become famous throughout the academy. I am going to tell you that nothing here is edible, he said, and then we are going to prove together just how wrong that statement is. The galaxy had underestimated humans because they only saw what humans lacked. They saw weak bodies and dull senses, and short. They missed what humans had in abundance. Creativity born from necessity. Stubbornness refined by 10,000 generations of survival. Compassion that extended to strangers and former enemies alike. And above all, the absolute refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. On world after world, the lesson spread. Nothing is truly barren. Nothing is truly impossible. You just have to be human enough to keep looking until you find a way.